L'Écosse, nation au patrimoine florissant. La musique, la danse, les langues et la tradition du conte sont toujours très présentes dans les esprits. Ce dernier aspect, aussi nommé storytelling par les anglophones, sera le fil rouge de l'enquête menée au cours de mon voyage. Édimbourg, première étape. Malgré sa taille, elle nous plonge dans un univers parallèle aux saveurs de passé. De nuit, les closes, ou passages, qui ornent la Royal Mile confèrent à la ville une atmosphère à la fois étrange et attirante. Y revenant à la fin de mon voyage, je n'y reste pas longtemps. Je quitte la ville partant à la recherche d'informations et de rencontres. Entre héritage celtique et scandinave, l'Écosse fourmille de créatures et de légendes mythologiques. Ayant de nombreuses fois disputé les trônes avec l'Angleterre, son passé agité m'intéresse également, et je me dirige vers Stirling, autrefois capitale du royaume d'Écosse. À mon arrivée à Stirling, je rencontre David Kinnaird, guide historique et comédien. Il m'invite alors à capter un moment de sa balade journalière. Les anecdotes sont autant improbables que poétiques, retraçant avec humour l'histoire de la ville. David nous raconte au pied de la Merca Cross, croix du marché, l'origine de la bête de Stirling.
Now, according to tradition, a little more than 1,000 years ago, the Vikings came to call one winter's night. They moored their longboats by the banks of the River Forth and stealthily began their ascent of the craggy volcanic rock to the tiny community which had established itself at its summit. And one of them, rather carelessly, trod upon the paw of a sleeping wolf cub. And it yelped for its mammy. Mammy howled for its dad, and soon the whole pack were howling into the night. The locals, roused from their beds, looked out their windows and noticed a rather large number of Scandinavian gentlemen with pointy hats and pointy sticks approaching them at high speed. The wolf's howl gave the townsfolk the chance to defend themselves, and it has been adopted as the beast of Stirling ever since. Give me an ah. Oh, it's a lovely story, my friends. A charming story, a fine story. And exactly the same story told in Cardiff, Truro, and I believe parts of Brittany. Indeed, in Edinburgh they tell a very similar story, only there it's not a wolf cub and a Viking, it's a thistle and a shoeless Englishman. And as we learn the business of history very quickly, one should never ever let a little thing like the truth get in the way of a good story.
Cette dernière phrase retentissant encore dans ma tête, je pars vers les Hébrides. Ma rencontre avec David me donne de nouvelles directions de recherche. Quels sont les autres thèmes qu'un conteur voudrait aborder ? Quel rôle peuvent prendre le passé et l'imagination dans cet univers ? Comment les histoires passent-elles de génération en génération ? Entre-temps, je reçois quelques pistes de la part d'Amanda Edmonston et John Barrington. Les récits de la première sont étroitement liés à la botanique et la médecine. Ils ont chacun un but prédéfini, une morale. Le second n'a pas de domaine de spécialité et ne compte que pour le plaisir de partager des faits et divertir le public. À Stornoway, à l'ouest de l'Écosse, pendant la période du festival celtique des Hébrides, je rencontre Maggie Smith. Son témoignage apporte alors des réponses à mes questions.
My name is Maggie Smith and I live in the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. I'm a native Gaelic speaker and I tell stories and I sing traditional songs and I'm also an actress. There's a big debate as to whether It's a play, it's a monologue, or it's a story. We've included songs and phrases, and we've gathered material that was contributed by the ladies who were in their 90s, who lived in care homes and had loads of time to chat, and very, very vivid memories of what they had of their lives, their early lives, and the challenges of being a young woman who had never left the island, but who followed the herring industry right round the coast of Scotland, down to the south of England. It's like reminiscence theatre, and usually after the performance they'll all share their family stories because they can identify with it, because every family had a link to the fishing, and a lot of the families still treasure mementos brought back from the fishing by their grannies or their aunties. We started off, it was going to be 2 performances, and we've done about 30-something performances. It's had a tremendous response. It's been loads of fun. And we're hoping to continue in that vein this coming winter. It's a song written by a herring girl who is hoping that her soldier lover will come to see her in the next fishing port. And she describes what he's wearing. He's wearing a shirt that's as white as a daisy, and high tackety boots and stockings with a cable pattern up the side, and he is sure good looking. Hiriu a graien niku, hiriu an chiku grai, niku hjalt in jaram som leone, ek in jaskach man hikach, smik an anache du a goel, stok in voyach spraken art, lene jal trechen jonian, kalas en hodje hemagrai, hiriu a graien iku, hiriu an chiku grai, niku hjalt in jaram som leone, ek in jaskach man hikach.
Les histoires du passé permettent ainsi de se réunir autour d'expériences vécues. Elles relient les générations entre elles par transmission de savoir. Les collectes de témoignages qu'a effectué Maggie sont un genre de travail d'historienne. Sa démarche semble plutôt intellectuelle, avec une volonté de comprendre et restituer le plus fidèlement possible un temps dont seuls les plus âgés peuvent se rappeler. En contant cette histoire, elle contribue à la sauvegarde d'un héritage qui aurait pu s'éteindre avec les dernières générations. À St Andrews, je rencontre Sheila Kinneman, travaillant sur un autre aspect du storytelling.
My name's Sheila Kinneman, and at the moment I'm a professional storyteller. I retired not that long ago from being a nursery teacher, and when I retired I took up my first love, which was telling stories. And I love to tell Scottish folk and fairy tales, but I also tell tales from all over the world. The Witch of Fife. A long time ago, in a little cottage on the edge of town, there lived an old man and an old woman. Now the old man was a very quiet, gentle kind of man. He worked very hard, he kept himself to himself. But his wife, she was a different character altogether. She was flighty, scary. She would disappear in the middle of the night and arrive back in the morning looking as if she'd done a whole day's work already, with her hair askew and her clothes tattered and torn as if she'd been dragged through a hedge backwards. Well, the people of the town talked about this old woman. They used to nudge each other and say, "Oh, do you think she's a witch?" And her husband heard them one day and thought, maybe she is a witch. Maybe I should ask her, because, well, it's only fair that a husband should know exactly what his wife gets up to. So one morning, as they sat by breakfast, he said, "Wife, are you a witch?" Well, he could have knocked him over with a feather when she said, "Aye, I'm a witch, but dinna tell anybody. And if you promise not to tell anybody, I will promise to tell you all about all the adventures I have when I come back." Well, the old man thought this was only fair, because it was only fair that he should know all about his wife. So he agreed. Didn't have long to wait, because soon it was the full moon and she disappeared one night and came back in the morning and said, "Husband, we had such a great time last night. I met up with some of my cronies under the old hazel tree, and we took a branch of the tree and we sat astride that branch and we flew all the way up to the Highlands of Scotland, where we met up with fairies. And oh, they were playing the most wonderful music on their bagpipes and their fiddles, and they were dancing and whirling and birling all night. We slaked our thirst on the most beautiful heather ale that you've ever tasted. And then we came home. Oh," he said, "you would have been much better back here in your bed than gallivanting away like that." Well, the next month, the same thing happened. The wife disappeared and arrived back the next morning and said, "Oh, husband, let me tell you what we got up to last night. Last night we came down to the beach and we found big cockle shells, and we turned them into boats and we sailed away across the North Sea to Scandinavia, where we met up with fairies and elves of the North Countries, and they were having a festival and we joined in. And what's best of all, the elves of the north gave us some words that we could say that would take us into anywhere we desired to be. Doors would fly open at the sound of these words." "Oh, what were you doing away in these cold countries?" said her husband. "You would have been better here sitting by the fire, keeping yourself warm." Well, a month later, and the wife came home with an even better story that made the old man's ears prick up a bit. He was quite a bit more interested in this one, because this time she told him of how they'd met up in the house of one of her cronies. And they'd heard tell that the Bishop of Carlisle had some wonderful wine in his wine cellar. So they gathered together inside the kitchen of one of her friends, and one by one they stood on the cooking pot and said the words, and whoosh, up through the chimney they went, out the lum and through the skies, until they landed in front of the bishop's palace. And the chains and the locks fell away, and they were able to walk inside the wine cellar, and they spent the whole night tasting the different wines. And then they appeared back in the morning. Well, her husband was quite partial to a little drop of wine, and he said to her, "Could you tell me these words, please? I would like to go and visit the bishop's wine cellar and have a wee taste of his wine." "Oh no," she said, "I couldn't tell you these words. No, never. If I told them to you, you might tell them to someone else. And if the whole world knew these words, the whole world would be in chaos. No, I'll keep them to myself." Well, that made the old man determined that next time she disappeared, he would follow her. And that's what he did. The next time she was due to go, he hid himself in the kitchen of one of her friends, and he watched as they gathered together and stood on top of the cooking pot and whooshed up the chimney. And as the last one disappeared, he stood on the cooking pot and he flew up in the air as well. Now, as we all know, witches never look back when they're travelling through the air. So nobody looked back and nobody saw that he was there until he landed on the floor beside them in the bishop's palace. And all the witches looked and said, "What's he doing here?" But never mind. They got on with their tasting of the wine and he joined in. But you see, he was a man and he didn't know when to stop. He was having glass after glass after glass until eventually he was flat out on the floor, drunk as a lord, sound asleep. Well, when it came time for the witches to leave, off they went and left him lying there. "That'll serve him right," they said. Well, in the morning, the bishop's servants came in to the cellar and found him lying there. And nobody knew how he could possibly have got there because all the doors were still locked. So he was declared a warlock and he would be burnt at the stake. And that's why later that day he found himself chained to a stake, fire burning all around him. He thought he would never see his home in Fife again. Then through the air came a big crow, squawking, and it landed on his shoulder, and he realised that it wasn't a crow at all but his wife. And his wife whispered the words in his ear. And immediately, as all the people watched on, the chains fell away and he whooshed through the air and found himself back in his home in Fife. Well, from that day on, he never again bothered his wife about what she was up to. He let her keep herself to herself and he kept himself to himself. And that's the end of my story of the Witch of Fife. I would tell that story possibly to older children, but most and to adults. With children's stories, I do tend to be maybe a bit gentler with lots of animals in them and maybe little songs and things that they can join in, chants, rhymes for them to join in with. And sometimes if you've got an audience, you sort of interact with the audience a bit. If I was telling to a lot of local people, I would be more Scottish. See, John's Scottish words will be kind of different from my Scottish words, and you'll hear different Scottish words in Dundee and you'll hear different Scottish words up in Aberdeen because we have our local dialects. And you know, the north, they have their Gaelic and their Scottish. Down here in the south we have what's called Lallans, which is Lowland Scots. And saying you're not learning the story off by heart. You're not learning a script. You're not an actor. You're not learning a script. You're telling it in your own words. So it will be different every time. I mean, there are storytellers who do, you know, a performance and it's always exactly the same. I don't think that's real storytelling. I mean, when I'm telling a story, I'm not reading words. I'm seeing pictures like a film and I'm telling you what I'm seeing in these pictures.
Les contes originaux amusent et enseignent par la surprise et l'inattendu. Ainsi, imaginaires, nous pouvons nous y identifier et les réapproprier librement. Je reviens à Édimbourg où je rencontre Beverly Bryant.
I'm Beverly Bryant and I'm a storyteller from Dunfermline in Fife. I'm also a storyteller with this Scottish Storytelling Centre, and at the moment we're up in the library in the centre. This is where we hold our workshops, but usually I tell my stories in a high school in Dunfermline, Woodmill High School, to young people aged between 11 and 18 years old. Or adults. I'm most comfortable with adults. I have a group of young people who are very interested in storytelling, and we meet at lunchtimes and after school and they work on stories. In fact, they've hosted Cafe Voices themselves, so they've been working on storytelling for a few years with me now, and they're very good. This year they're going to help young people themselves and they're also going to help youngsters from other high schools in the area to learn the skills. So I'm just cascading it. We're just more and more people getting telling stories is what we're looking for. It's a very warm and welcoming place to be, and something to be involved in that is warm and welcoming. I mean, they talk about when you're telling a story, you talk about the storyteller's hug. That your audience is in the shape where you could hug them.
Assurer la succession est un véritable travail. Si toutes les générations viennent écouter les histoires, raconter est un art que peu de conteurs ont transmis ces dernières décennies. Heureusement, le storytelling revient peu à peu et les ateliers se multiplient. La tradition reprend de l'élan pour nous emmener encore plus longtemps dans ces multiples mondes.
Et merci à tous, merci de m'avoir suivi dans mes aventures, de votre soutien moral, financier et que sais-je encore. Merci et à bientôt.
Untie these bands from off my hands and bring to me my soul. There's no man in old Scotland but I brave him at a word. Sir Anthony, say wantonly, say dauntingly gaily, and he played the tune and he danced through below the gallows tree. Farewell to light, your sunshine bright, and all beneath the sky. May coward shame disdain the name of him.